Emily and Daniel had been in each other's lives since high school, and their friendship had grown into a nearly 3-decade-long marriage. Daniel, a software developer, and Emily, a hospital lab technician, had built their life on shared dreams and mutual respect. But over the years, subtle changes began to surface in their relationship. Emily became more distant, which worried Daniel. At first, he chalked it up to work stress, but recently, she had become secretive and preoccupied. Despite his growing concerns, Daniel trusted her and didn't press for answers. What he didn't know was that Emily was conflicted, torn between her family and a past connection that had resurfaced. As she prepared for a vacation with her sister, Daniel hoped the time apart would help them reconnect. On Sunday, October 3, 2010, as Emily and her sister Susan headed for the airport shuttle, Daniel jokingly told her, "Enjoy yourself and don't worry about me. I'll be fine." Emily smiled and Susan teased, "Just don't let your sister get into trouble." Emily playfully responded, "I'll behave. You behave yourself. I'll be back in 2 weeks, and I expect the house to be intact," Emily said, kissing Daniel deeply. "Be careful and remember, I love you more than anything." Susan, impatient in the van, called out, "Come on, we've got a plane to catch." Emily mouthed, "I love you," as Daniel, rolling his eyes, replied, "Bye, hon. Love you too." As the van drove away, Daniel muttered, "Finally, they're gone." Returning to the house, his excitement grew as he thought about his surprise plan. Over the next few days, he and their son, Ryan, would transform the master bedroom into Emily's dream room, based on one of those fancy home decor magazines. It would be his special 30th anniversary gift to her. Daniel called Ryan, urging him to hurry. "We've got a lot to do: painting, new carpet, furniture assembly," all while Emily's away. Daniel began clearing out the bedroom, moving everything to the spare room. He started with the dresser, nightstands, and armoire, then tackled their 2 large walk-in closets. Over the years, they had accumulated a lot of clutter, everything from old tools to school papers. Daniel and Emily both had a habit of hoarding, so it wasn't an easy task, but it was essential for the surprise renovation. With a sigh, Daniel entered his closet, and an hour later, everything was boxed up and moved. Next, he stood in the doorway of Emily's closet, feeling overwhelmed. Ryan came in, holding lunch. "Brought you a sandwich and soda," he said, tripping over a box. "Geez, Ryan, knock first. You almost gave me a heart attack," Daniel said. "Sorry, here's your lunch," Ryan replied. They ate in silence for 15 minutes. When they finished, Daniel said, "I'll pack the small stuff. You move the big items to the spare room. Then we need to take the furniture to the garage for Goodwill." Ryan nodded. "Got it." They continued working. Daniel packed Emily's clothes, shoes, and small items while Ryan moved boxes. When Ryan found a small case on a high shelf, he asked, "What's this?" Daniel recognized it as part of an old luggage set from his late mother-in-law. He tried to open it, but it was locked. "Just put it with the rest," Daniel muttered, eager to finish. 2 hours later, they had cleared the closet. After a short break, they disassembled the furniture and moved it to the garage. By dinner time, they were exhausted. Daniel gave Ryan $20 for pizza, and they cracked open a couple of beers. After dinner, Ryan left to avoid upsetting his wife, Megan. Daniel stayed behind, cleaning up and prepping the room for painting. By 9 p.m., he was done with taping, plastering, and sanding. Tired, he grabbed a beer and collapsed into his lounge chair, falling asleep almost immediately. The next morning, Ryan showed up at 7 a.m., as promised. They had cereal for breakfast, and Daniel said, "Today's all about painting. I'll handle the high spots. You do the low ones. We need to finish everything, no matter how late." Ryan agreed, noting that Megan would be at her mother's all day, so they wouldn't be interrupted. They spent the entire day painting, and by the end of it, Daniel was asleep in his chair again, beer in hand, in front of the TV. But this time, he showered first. On Tuesday, October 5th, the carpet installation crew arrived at 6 a.m. With nothing to do but stay out of their way, Daniel had breakfast and watched the professionals work quickly. By 10 a.m., the carpet was in place, and Daniel had a few hours before the furniture was set to arrive. While he waited, Daniel found the beige cosmetics case again. It felt heavier than it should have, and his curiosity got the better of him. He tried to open it with a paperclip but was interrupted by the doorbell. The furniture delivery had arrived, and after directing the movers, Daniel left them to their work. Once the furniture was in place, Daniel began moving everything back from the spare room. By midnight, he was too tired to continue and collapsed in his lounge chair with a beer. On Wednesday, October 6th, Daniel slept in. By 9 a.m., he dropped the old furniture at Goodwill and grabbed breakfast at Denny's. By noon, he was back home, finishing the cleanup. After putting everything back in the bedroom, he hung a banner over the bed that read, "Surprise." Before calling it a day, Daniel noticed a long gouge in the paint. "Damn," he muttered, spending a few minutes touching it up. Afterward, he cleaned up, showered, and prepared for dinner. While washing his paintbrush, it fell onto the small cosmetics case. Frustrated, Daniel grabbed a rag and some turpentine, cleaning the case until it looked like new. Curious, Daniel retrieved a jar of old keys from the garage and found one that fit the Samsonite luggage locks. Sitting at the kitchen table, he unlocked the case. Inside, he found a large, unopened manila envelope addressed to Emily from S. Mitchell in Seattle, dated September 15, 1991. Daniel set the envelope aside and pulled out a blue bikini, smiling at the thought of Emily wearing it. But his smile faded when he discovered something else. Beneath the bikini was a photo of Emily kissing another man at a dinner table. His hands trembled as he stared at the photo, struggling to understand why his wife was kissing someone else. Feeling nauseous, Daniel rushed to the bathroom to calm himself. When he returned, he stared at the items spread out before him. The cosmetics case, the envelope, the bikini, and the photo. His mind was spinning. Daniel sat down and began sifting through the stack of photos in the case. Each one featured the same man, some formal, some explicit, including a few old Polaroids. Among the items, Daniel found a woman's white silk scarf wrapped around a stack of letters tied with a red ribbon. The letters were addressed to Emily at work, dated between 1989 and 1991. Daniel opened the earliest one, dated June 22, 1989. It read, "My dearest Emily, it's been only a month, but I miss you terribly. I miss your voice, your touch, your lips, and most of all, your presence beside me in bed. San Diego is everything I hoped for, but it's incomplete without you. I can't wait to be with you again. With all my love, James." Stunned, Daniel shouted, "Holy crap, she had a lover." Overwhelmed, he threw the letter down. His mind raced with questions, but he knew the only way to understand was to go through everything in the case. He moved the items to the living room and began unpacking. Inside a blue felt jewelry box was a gold heart-shaped locket he recognized from a photo of Emily at a fancy dinner. There were also napkins with "I love you" written on one and a phone number on the other, an invitation to a 1990 awards ceremony for Drive James Bennett, and a dried red rose. Other items included matchbooks, hotel receipts, a California map, and personal mementos like a black velvet sleep mask and a tube of KY jelly. Confused and hurt, Daniel opened the large manila envelope. Inside were more letters and photos, some explicit, others of Emily with James. His stomach churned, but he forced himself to continue. Daniel found letters Emily had written to James, pouring out her love and pain over his move to California. She begged him to return, saying she couldn't let him go. Overcome with emotion, Daniel cried out, unsure what to do. Torn between his love for Emily and the pain of the affair, he collapsed on the floor in tears and eventually fell asleep. On Thursday, October 7, 2010, Emily was frustrated with her phone's lack of signal. "Why can't I get a connection?" she muttered. Susan, ever sarcastic, replied, "We're on a ship, dummy. Why do you want to call home anyway? Rich is probably doing something boring. Enjoy yourself." Annoyed, Emily shot back, "You're a pain sometimes. I'm going to see if I can get a message to Rich," and walked off, calling Susan a witch under her breath. At the ship's communications office, Emily tried calling home, but no one answered. She sent an email to Daniel, telling him about the fun she was having and Susan's antics, then returned to the pool, disappointed that she couldn't reach him. Meanwhile, Daniel woke up on the living room floor. surrounded by the contents of Emily's cosmetics case. The pain of discovering her affair still lingered, but he knew he had to face the day. After his morning routine, he stared at the mess, his eyes resting on a photo of Emily from her babe period. Daniel reflected on their history. They had known each other since high school, where Emily, though average in appearance, had seen something special in Daniel. They dated through college and married shortly after graduating. Daniel worked in computer science, and Emily became a lab technologist. They built their careers, bought a house, and had a son, Ryan. Over time, Emily entered what Daniel called her babe period, losing weight, tanning, and getting a new wardrobe that turned heads. Despite the attention she received, Emily remained loyal to Daniel. But when Emily became emotionally drained from work, she went through a period of depression. Daniel took care of Ryan and the household until Emily recovered. One day, she tearfully apologized for forgetting Daniel's birthday, overwhelmed by her struggles. Daniel reassured her, joking that she could make it up to him over the weekend. Soon after, Emily regained some weight, returning to her pre-babe period size. The attention faded, but Daniel and Emily were happy. He didn't care about her weight. He loved her just as she was. Daniel stood over the contents of Emily's cosmetics case, the photo of her unclothed haunting him. No matter how much this hurts, I need to know the truth. And if we even have a future, he thought aloud. He picked up a letter dated August 19, 1989. Darling Emily, our time together last week was unforgettable. I can still smell your perfume, hear your moans. The plane ride home was torture, knowing I was getting farther from you. Our love won't fade, no matter the distance. The third time we made love was the most tender of my life. I love you, James. Daniel's stomach turned. This is how it used to be with us, he thought, bitterness welling up. But now she's doing this with someone else. Anger flared as he grabbed another letter, dated August 21, 1989. My love, it took days to recover from our time together. I'm sorry we only had one day, but I'll never forget it. I love you so deeply. I'm torn between you and my life at home. I need both of you. I can't imagine living without either of you. I'm confused, but I know you'll always be in my heart and in my bed. Daniel's hands shook. She loves both of us? Is she out of her mind? Or am I missing something? His thoughts spiraled as he wondered if Ryan was even his son. Determined to understand, he read through letter after letter, the weight of the betrayal sinking in deeper with every word. He found receipts, matchbooks, and other mementos from their secret meetings. His world felt like it was crumbling. When Daniel came across a letter from James's sister, Sarah Mitchell, dated August 14, 1991, it hit him like a punch to the gut. Emily, my name is Sarah Mitchell, James's sister. I found your letter to him, and I'm shocked. I never imagined James would have an affair, but it's clear from your words that you two loved each other. James died last week in a car accident. We had his funeral yesterday, and I'm enclosing a service card for you. I'm helping his wife, Laura, go through his things, and I'll try to keep her from finding out about you. If I find anything else, I'll send it your way. Please don't contact me or James's family. I'm sorry for your loss. Sarah Mitchell. The letter was wrinkled and stained with tears. So that's why Emily was so distant last month, Daniel thought. Her lover died. No wonder she was in bed for weeks and even missed my birthday. Daniel's mind raced. How could Emily claim to love both him and James? How do you give 100% to two people? His heart ached with the realization that Emily had been lying to him for years. He understood now that her affair had lasted over 3 years, starting when James had come to the hospital. They'd met in secret, even after he moved to San Diego, hiding their encounters behind work conferences. Jammies blurred as Daniel read through the rest of the letters and mementos. At 10 p.m., he realized he had spent the whole day obsessing over Emily's betrayal. Needing air, he stepped outside, leaving the door unlocked, his mind overwhelmed by the truth. The next day, Emily left a voicemail. Rich, where are you? I tried calling yesterday. I miss you, and I love you. Please be there tonight, or I might just stay on this ship forever. Daniel listened in silence, bitterness rising in his chest. She says she loves me. Liar, he muttered, pacing through the house. I love you too, You two timing which, he thought to himself, but I can't believe a word you say anymore. I need to figure out what to do. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, he sighed, his reflection a hollow version of the man he once was. God, you look awful. He decided to take action. After a shower and breakfast, he sat down at the kitchen table to plan his next steps. In an hour, he had come up with a rough plan, starting with a home DNA test to find out if Ryan was truly his son. With a week left before Emily's return, Daniel buried himself in chores, hoping to avoid sinking into despair. Meanwhile, Emily, growing more anxious with each passing day, left messages for both Daniel and Ryan, urging them to check in on him. I hope nothing's wrong, she thought, her concern mounting. The next day, Ryan reluctantly showed up at Daniel's house, frustrated by his task. After knocking, Daniel finally called out from the backyard where he was trimming a tree. Ryan handed his father a bottle of water and grabbed the mail, which included the DNA kit. Daniel, pretending it was a flu test, convinced Ryan to help. Afterward, Ryan urged him to call Emily and left. Daniel completed the DNA test and sealed it in the return envelope, ready to mail on Monday. He spent the rest of the day doing household chores, trying to distract himself from the mess his life had become. That night, he finally ate a decent meal, pizza and beer. On Sunday morning, Daniel left Emily a voicemail, reassuring her that he was fine and would call on Monday. He spent the day at the park, watching ducks and families, trying to keep his mind off everything. On Monday, October 11th, Daniel followed his usual routine but with significant changes. He mailed the DNA test, then went to his workplace's HR office to apply for immediate retirement, something he hadn't planned on until Emily could retire too. Those plans were now shattered. After informing his boss of his decision, he took 2 weeks of leave and left the office for the last time. At the bank, Daniel set up a new checking account in his name, retrieved his passport and important papers from the safety deposit box, and got a new credit card. He also removed his name from the joint accounts with Emily and paid off their balances. At the insurance agency, he changed the beneficiary of his life insurance to Ryan, updating his car insurance to separate their policies. Later that afternoon, Daniel met with his friend and attorney, Jack Morgan. Jack joked about how they should get together more often, but quickly noticed Daniel's somber mood. Daniel explained the situation with Emily and asked about the statute of limitations for divorce. Jack was shocked, but Daniel insisted on proceeding with divorce papers. Jack advised talking to Emily and considering counseling, but agreed to begin drafting the divorce papers with a 50-50 split of assets. Daniel also requested to remove Emily from his will, making Ryan the sole beneficiary. Jack again recommended talking to Emily, but Daniel wasn't ready. He wanted time alone to think and promised to contact Jack once he had made up his mind. That night, Daniel struggled to sleep in the newly redecorated bedroom. The space, which was supposed to be a fresh start, only reminded him of the life he was leaving behind. Unable to settle, he spent the night in a lounge chair, lost in thought. On Tuesday, October 12th, Emily left another voicemail, but Daniel didn't respond. He knew he had to finalize everything before she returned, planning to be gone before she came home. By Wednesday, October 13th, Daniel had all his financials in order and called Jack to check on the divorce paperwork. Jack deliberately delayed it, hoping Daniel would reconsider talking to Emily. Daniel provided Jack with a landline number for emergencies, but insisted that Emily not be given the number. Daniel spent the rest of the day preparing to leave. Though the DNA results hadn't arrived, he quietly packed his things and disappeared that night at 9 p.m., leaving everything behind. On Thursday, October 14th, Emily, now panicked, called Ryan. "Ryan, go check on your father. I haven't heard from him since I left. Call me right back after you find him. I need to talk to him before I get home on Friday, and someone has to pick us up at the airport." "Yes, Mom, I'll call you after I talk to Dad," Ryan replied, dropping the phone and drifting back to sleep next to Megan. Friday, October 15th, Emily and Susan returned from their trip. As the airport shuttle dropped them off at the house, Emily nudged her sister awake. "Wake up, we're home." Susan mumbled, "Just let me sleep until we get to my place," turning away from the door. Emily paid the driver, carried her luggage inside, and called out, "Rich, I'm home. Where are you?" Silence. She checked the kitchen for a note, but there was nothing. She opened the back door and called again. Still no response. He must be at the airport waiting for us, she thought. But when she called Daniel's cell phone, it rang on the counter. He forgot it again, she sighed. As Emily unpacked upstairs, she was startled by the transformation of their bedroom. A large surprise banner hung over the bed. Everything was exactly as she had dreamed. New furniture, fresh carpet, soothing colors. Rich, you sneaky planner, she thought. I can't wait to thank you tonight. But as she continued unpacking, her gaze fell on the banner again. This time, she noticed a small photo attached. A picture of her and James at the Chicago Awards banquet, with a number scrawled across her face. Her heart sank. Oh my God, no. Panic rose in her chest. Emily rushed to find the cosmetics case but couldn't locate it. Desperation set in as she tore through the house, finally realizing that Daniel must have found it. Collapsing onto the bed, she sobbed uncontrollably, the weight of her secrets crashing down on her. She tried calling Ryan, her sister, and their friends, but no one knew where Daniel was. Alone, she continued calling, her anxiety escalating. After an hour of unanswered calls, Susan arrived. He can't have gone far, Susan said, trying to calm her. Have you called his friends? Maybe he's at a ball game? But Emily couldn't bring herself to tell Susan the truth about James. Susan's attempts to soothe her only heightened her anxiety. Daniel was gone, and Emily feared he was gone for good. Emily is convinced that Daniel discovered the affair from 20 years ago and has left for good. She sends Susan home, promising to call if Daniel shows up. Saturday, October 16, 2010. Emily spends the entire day crying and worrying. Susan suggests calling the police, but when Emily does, the dispatcher tells her she must wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. Emily contacts local hospitals, but there's no sign of Daniel. While she's relieved he's not injured, the uncertainty only deepens her anxiety. Sunday, Emily spends the entire day in bed, praying and crying. God, please bring Rich back. I'll do anything. Just let him call so we can talk. I love him. My heart is breaking. She can't help but replay everything in her mind, hoping for a resolution. Monday, Emily files a missing persons report with the police. An officer arrives, takes Daniel's photo and description, and leaves with a vague promise to let her know if they find anything. Emily can't shake the fear that they'll only call if they find his body. Later, Emily opens an envelope addressed to Daniel. Inside is a letter from the DNA testing company confirming that Daniel and Ryan are indeed father and son. Emily, familiar with DNA tests, realizes Daniel must have doubted Ryan's paternity, suspecting James could be his father. But James came into my life after Ryan was born, she thinks. She notices that the test results were also sent to their lawyer, Jack Morgan. Emily decides to call him. Jack explains that Daniel was deeply depressed and had been fixated on the contents of her cosmetics case. He tells Emily that Daniel felt betrayed and needed time to think. Jack admits that Daniel had asked him to prepare divorce papers, but they haven't been signed yet. Emily pleads with him to tell her where Daniel is, but Jack insists he doesn't know. However, he promises to contact her if Daniel signs the papers. Emily spends the rest of the day crying and praying for Daniel's return. 10 days later, frustrated by Jack's delay, Emily finally hears from Ryan that Daniel is staying at Aunt Helen's lake house. Emily drives there, praying for some kind of closure. When she arrives, she finds Daniel sitting by the water, unkempt and lost in thought. He doesn't acknowledge her as she approaches. She sits beside him, but he stares out over the lake, distant. Emily reaches out, taking his cold hand in hers. "Rich," she says softly, "I have a story to tell you. I'll be completely honest with you. Please, just listen." Daniel remains still, his eyes never leaving the horizon. She continues, "I met James at Ryan's 3rd birthday party at the daycare. He mistook it for his daughter's party, since they shared the same birthday. We laughed, we talked about our kids, and eventually, we started talking about ourselves. He was a new doctor, feeling overwhelmed. So, we began having lunch together regularly. We became friends. He introduced me to the research that led me to join Weight Watchers. Over time, our conversations grew more personal. He complimented me on my weight loss, and we began to share our desires and fantasies. One day, he invited me to dinner after work, and that's when I realized I had feelings for him. We admitted our feelings at dinner, but we both agreed we didn't want to hurt our spouses. After that, we started holding hands, and eventually, we kissed. When he kissed me, it felt the same way as when you kiss me, Rich. I loved him just as much as I loved you, and I couldn't understand how I could love two men at the same time. But I didn't want it to stop. We continued seeing each other. I loved both of you deeply, and I didn't know how to solve the problem. Daniel suddenly stands up and walks toward the house without saying a word. Emily, stunned, tries to follow, but the doors are locked. As dusk falls and the temperature drops, she retreats to her car, determined to wait. The next morning, October 17th, 2010, Emily wakes to the sound of a motorboat. She sees Daniel in a small skiff, drifting aimlessly in the middle of the lake. Then, he stands up, unexpectedly losing his balance, and falls into the water. Emily's heart races. He can't swim. She realizes in panic. "Help!" she screams, and a neighbor rushes to her aid. Emily watches anxiously as the neighbor pulls Daniel from the water and brings him back to shore. She can't tell if he's alive or unconscious, but she's desperate. Together, they manage to get Daniel inside, strip him of his wet clothes, and lay him on a bed. After thanking the neighbor, Emily spends the next hour cleaning Daniel up, dressing him in dry clothes, and even shaving him. She sits beside the bed, watching him sleep, her emotions a chaotic mix of relief and guilt. 2 hours later, Daniel stirs. He gets up and slowly walks to the kitchen table. When he finally looks at Emily, his eyes are filled with tears. He opens his mouth, trying to speak, but it takes several moments before the words come out. "Do you remember me telling you about my old girlfriend, Jessica?" Daniel asks. "We dated for about a year, and then one day, she broke up with me over the phone. She said she had a new boyfriend. I rushed to her house, and they were waiting for me. I was furious, but I didn't do anything, even when her new boyfriend taunted me. I just walked away, humiliated. Later, I ran into her new boyfriend again. I planned to hit him with a pool stick I kept in my car, but a guy from the neighborhood, Tom, stopped me. He told me no girl was worth what I was about to do. I believed him until I met you. You are worth everything to me, Emily. You're worth dying for." Today on the lake, I thought about that story again. I realized that eliminating myself over what you did would have been wrong. Emily stares at Daniel, her heart aching with a mixture of guilt, relief, and love. For the first time in days, she feels the weight of his love for her, despite everything that has happened. But she knows the path ahead won't be easy. Daniel lowers his head onto the table. "I wanted to live, to talk to you. I need to know why," he says softly. Emily, her heart breaking, reaches for him, pulling him into an embrace. They sit in silence, both quietly crying. After a long pause, Daniel lifts his head, looks at Emily, and says, "Let's go home." 2 months later, life is still tense between them. They share the same house but sleep in separate rooms. Daniel is distant, and Emily is always on edge. Their son, Ryan, only visits briefly. Every weekend, Daniel spends time at Aunt Helen's house, and Emily can't stop worrying that he might harm himself again. Today is Ryan's birthday. The family gathers for cake and presents, but when it's Daniel's turn, he retrieves the cosmetics case and DNA test report from the garage and places them on the table. Emily's stomach sinks. Daniel, calm and distant, looks at Ryan and says, "Ryan, your mother has a story to tell you. It won't be easy, but you need to listen." Then he quietly leaves the house. Emily, overcome with emotion, runs from the room, tears flowing. Ryan and Megan try to comfort her, but all they hear is her crying behind the bedroom door. After about an hour, Emily returns, red-eyed, and begins telling Ryan about her past with James. By midnight, Daniel returns home. He looks at Ryan and says, "Go home. I'll take it from here." Ryan and Megan leave, and Daniel hands Emily a card. "Dr. Lisa Evans, marriage counselor. We have an appointment next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Without another word, Daniel heads upstairs to bed. Emily stares at the card, her mind racing. Next Tuesday, Dr. Lisa Evans prepares for her session with the Harper. This case is challenging, she thinks. It looks like typical infidelity, but there are deeper layers. I hope I can help them. When Daniel and Emily arrive, Dr. Evans welcomes them warmly and gestures toward the couch. Please have a seat, she says. I specialize in marital issues, particularly infidelity. My goal is to uncover the root causes of your problems and help you both find common ground. Sometimes couples decide to part ways, but I'm optimistic we can work through this. She continues, I don't perform miracles, but I believe we can find answers. Our sessions will be open and honest. I'll guide the conversation, and I'll stop it when necessary. I won't sugarcoat things. Some truths will be enlightening, others painful. We will face them together. After the session, Dr. Evans says she'll meet with each of them individually to get their full perspectives. After each joint session, spend time at home reflecting on what we discussed, but avoid introducing new topics until the next session. Emily and Daniel nod in agreement. The ride home is silent. Once they're inside, Emily finally breaks the quiet. How do you want to handle this? Maybe we could talk for an hour with some wine in the living room. I'll need tissues. How does that sound? Daniel hesitates. Let's stick to soda or water. No booze. I don't want to say something I'll regret. And let's turn off the phones. No interruptions. Emily agrees and heads to turn off the phones. When she returns, they sit in silence for a while, neither knowing how to begin. Finally, Daniel speaks, his voice heavy with emotion. Today, you said you've always been happy with me. But how can that be true if you were with another man right after we married? Didn't I give you what you wanted? What did I do wrong? Emily interrupts, her voice firm. Dr. Evans said we need to focus on us, not anyone else. We'll talk about others later. But I will say this, I've always been happy with you and our marriage. That's the truth. I love you, Rich. I always have. If you were gone, I would be lost. Daniel sighs, his face pained. You're right. I got ahead of myself. I can be impatient. But until recently, I thought we had an ideal marriage. Sure, we argued, but I never doubted us. You were always my anchor. Now, everything feels upside down. I don't know what's real anymore. His voice cracks. It hurts to even look at you, because all I can think about are those letters. I can't stop imagining you with him. Stop. Emily interrupts sharply. We'll talk about that later, not now. Fine, Daniel mutters. But answer this. How many others were there? Should I expect to find more secrets? How many men have you been with during our happy marriage? Emily's eyes flare with anger. What are you accusing me of? I've only been with 2 men, James and you. Daniel's voice rises. But you lied about one man. How can I trust you didn't lie about others? Emily shakes her head. I haven't been with anyone else. Let's discuss this in session. No, Daniel insists, his frustration building. I need to know now. I can't keep living with this pain. If we can't talk about it, I'm done. Daniel storms upstairs, slamming the door behind him. Emily sits in the dark, muttering, that didn't go well. For weeks later, on the way home from another session, the air between them is thick with tension. Once home, Emily speaks first. Han, you never told me you read all the letters. Daniel looks at her flatly. I didn't think about it at first. Emily stares at him, her heart racing. And now you've read everything, haven't you? Daniel meets her gaze. I had to know, Emily. I couldn't go on not knowing. I was angry and embarrassed. Emily begins, her voice trembling. I hid all of this from you. I didn't consider your pain, what it would do to you to read those letters. I'm so sorry, Rich. I can't change the past, but I'll do anything to help us move forward. I love you, and I want you back. Daniel takes a deep breath. Emily, I never stopped loving you, even when this felt like the worst pain of my life. But the worst part is the images of you with another man. They haunt me, making me physically sick. I don't think you can understand that kind of pain. Emily's heart aches. Rich, we need to talk to Dr. Evans about those thoughts. But for now, let's just focus on being together. Maybe we can take a few days off, go to the mountains, and just be us. No pressure. I'm not sure, Daniel replies cautiously. I still feel uneasy around you. But if we want to move forward, we need to be together. So, okay, let's go. Just no sharp objects, he jokes, and for the first time in a while, they both laugh. 2 weeks later, on the drive home, Emily hesitates. Finally, she asks, Rich, what did you mean by my babe, period? I don't want to talk about it, Daniel replies curtly. Why not? Because it hurts too much. Let's drop it. Emily presses. What did I do that hurt you? Daniel sighs. Your babe, period, was when you joined Weight Watchers, lost weight, tanned, got your nails done, and bought a new wardrobe. You were no longer the overweight woman I married. You became a babe. Men noticed you, and I was proud but also worried someone better might take you away. It all changed when you got sick and returned to your old self. I loved you then, and I love you now, but knowing that transformation wasn't for me but for another man. It hurts. It ruins the memory. Emily whispers, Oh God, how could you? Daniel silently leaves for bed. 8 weeks later, after a tense session with Dr. Evans, they sit quietly in the living room. Daniel finally speaks. I don't get it. Dr. Evans said loving two people at once is common, but it sounds like nonsense to me. I understand the logic, but not the emotions. Emily tries to explain. She meant I loved both you and James simultaneously. It usually leads to someone getting hurt. We were hurt later. The second part is when people move on to love again after a loss. It's common. Daniel sighs. I don't understand. I can't imagine loving someone else without diminishing my love for you. Emily looks at him. You can't give 100% to two people at the same time. I don't fully understand it either, but when I was with you, you were my whole world. When I was with James, it was like flipping a switch between you two. I loved both of you completely. Daniel nods slowly. We'll need to keep talking about this. For now, let's write down questions for the next session. They retreat to separate bedrooms, both unsatisfied. 6 weeks later, Emily cries less, but Daniel still feels the weight of everything. He says, Honey, I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it. Well, maybe I did, but I wasn't trying to hurt you or be spiteful. I just said I was glad James died because I didn't have to share you with him. It wasn't until Dr. Evans explained how hard it was for you to lose him and not have anyone to grieve with that I started to see it from your perspective. I get it now. Emily wipes her eyes. You've been trying to understand how I could love two men at once. But do you see how losing one of them would devastate me? I loved him. He died. I died too. I grieved, just like I would if you had died. If you had died on that lake, I would have died too. Do you understand now? Daniel looks a bit embarrassed. I guess on some level, I do. I didn't mean it that way. I can be selfish too. Emily responds, her voice shaking with emotion. We just touched on this today. But when you found out about James, I had to go through all the sorrow of his death all over again. I still have feelings for him. I haven't thought of him in years, but I can still see his face. He'll always be in my memories. Daniel nods. Can we let Dr. Evans guide us through this next week? I can see it's going to be hard for both of us. Okay, Emily agrees softly. But get me a glass of wine before you go to bed. I need some time alone. Daniel brings her the wine, turns off the living room lights, and heads upstairs. At the top of the stairs, he hears sobbing from downstairs. He quietly closes his bedroom door. 8 weeks later, Emily finally lets her anger show. I can't talk to you tonight. You make me so mad, I could strangle you. You wanted a divorce without even talking to me? Are you crazy? We've talked about everything since we were married. And at this crucial point, you want to handle this alone? What are you thinking? I'm going to bed. Daniel sits in the dark living room with a beer, unwilling to speak. The next morning, he wakes to the smell of brewing coffee. He opens one eye, then the other, and sees a tall woman in a bathrobe holding a steaming cup of coffee. Breakfast is almost ready. Go clean up. Go, Emily says firmly. Daniel, still groggy, sees Emily in her bathrobe. After all these years, she still looks like a goddess in the morning, voluptuous and earthy. His heart races, but not because of the coffee. He gets up, knocks over an empty beer bottle, and heads to the bathroom. Staring in the mirror, he sees bloodshot eyes and the imprint of the couch cushion on his face. Neither looks good, but he heads back downstairs for breakfast anyway. After a meal Emily made, he leans back and really looks at her. She too has bloodshot eyes. I'm sorry, Emily says quietly. I'm still struggling to see things from your perspective. We need to write that down for Dr. Evans next time. Daniel smiles, a rare sight lately. It's okay. I struggle with it too. Sometimes when I speak, I don't think about how it sounds or how it makes you feel. I'm sorry. He pauses, then suggests, how about we have our conversation this morning? Emily interrupts. Wait a minute. What are you doing off work today? I took the day off. It's more important to talk this out with you than to push papers at the lab. They can manage without me. An hour later, they sit together in the backyard, sipping coffee. Why did you ask Jack to draft divorce papers? Emily asks, her voice soft. I was hurt and confused, Daniel admits. I wasn't thinking straight. I knew you cheated, and I didn't want to be with you anymore. I've always believed once a cheater, always a cheater. I didn't want to go through that again. Emily presses. But why didn't you want to talk to me first? Maybe we could have worked it out. Daniel sighs. If we'd talked, I'd have said things I'd regret. It would have hurt both of us. Besides, I was so hurt. I thought if you suffered too, I'd feel better. But, by the way, I don't feel better. Emily nods. That actually makes sense. I probably thought all those nasty things about myself, too. We need Dr. Evans to guide us through this. We can't leave anything unsaid or unresolved. We have to take our time. Daniel looks at her. Emily, can I ask you something off topic? Sure, anything. Did you ever think about leaving me while you were with James? Emily shakes her head. Never. I loved you. I never thought about leaving you. You've always been my world. I loved both of you, but I couldn't leave either of you. That issue is still open for me. I don't know if I'll ever fully resolve it. I may just have to live with it. Daniel smiles faintly. Been there. Done that. I understand. He changes the subject. Now let's shut up and get some sun. You're too pale. They spend a beautiful sunny day outside. A few weeks later, after another session with Dr. Evans, Daniel says, Wow, that was eye-opening. Do we want to talk about it now, or sleep on it? I'm still wired from the session, Emily replies. I say we talk now, but you look exhausted. I'm okay, Daniel reassures her. But tonight, I'll need something stronger than soda. Emily agrees. Okay, you relax, and I'll get us something to drink. When Daniel returns with a glass of wine for Emily and a soda for himself, he sees her lying on the couch, her head back and eyes closed. For a moment, he considers quietly covering her with a blanket and going to bed. But she opens her eyes and gives him a faint, crooked smile, the same one that first caught his attention in high school. Okay, hon. Where do you want to start? Emily asks. Daniel hesitates. I'm not sure. How about explaining what you meant when you said James rocked your world differently from me? I always thought our sex life was good, but evidently, I didn't measure up. Emily sighs. It's not that you were worse or better. With you, it was just making love. After Ryan was born, we rarely tried new things. We were comfortable with what we did. We knew each other's desires. We didn't need to experiment. It wasn't boredom. We just found what worked for us. Daniel's voice shakes. But with James, you did things you didn't do with me. Emily shakes her head. No, not really. You and I tried everything. But with James, we discovered new things that worked for both of us. It wasn't that he was better or that I preferred him. It was different. Daniel's pained expression deepens. Yeah, I read that. Thanks for reminding me. Emily gently responds, I'm not trying to upset you. It wasn't about better or worse. We just found different things we both loved. But at the end of the day, we still made love. Daniel is quiet, his pain still raw, but he nods. I never did anything with either of you that I didn't do with the other, Emily says. If you were into something unusual, like public sex, I'd probably try it and be into it because you were. Does that make sense? I guess, Daniel mutters. I don't know. I'm still struggling to get the image of you with another man out of my mind. I may never get over it. I just wish I didn't see that image every time I look at you. Emily sighs, her voice soft. I didn't mean to hurt you more. I'm just trying to be open and honest, to help us heal. It's hard for me to say these things too. We've got a long way to go, Daniel sighs. I know, Emily replies, but I'm here whenever you're ready. I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to make you feel comfortable with me, with us. Nothing is more important to me than having you back with me every night. I've missed you more than you know. I need you, Rich. I love you. Daniel nods. Just be patient. We've got some demons to conquer. 6 weeks later, Dr. Evans checks her appointment book and smiles. The Harper are next, and today may surprise them. When Daniel and Emily walk in, holding hands and talking, Dr. Evans takes it as a good sign. They sit on the couch, and she starts, "How are you both today?" Daniel answers, "I don't think I have unresolved issues from last time, but I still struggle with the images of Emily with someone else. They pop up and are hard to get past." Emily adds, "This past weekend was awkward. We know what to expect, but we're still carrying baggage, trying not to trip over it." She looks at Daniel. "We will get better, hon. I promise. I love you, and will do whatever it takes to make you feel comfortable. Nothing matters more to me than having you back with me every night." Daniel smiles faintly. "We'll get there. Just need patience." After a long pause, Dr. Evans delivers the news. "This will be our last session. You've made great progress. It's time for you to go on your own. I'll always be here if you need me, but now, the best therapy is for you two to figure out what's normal for you." Daniel turns to Emily, his voice steady. "Emily, I've loved you with all my heart, but unlike you, I only had you in my heart. I never divided my loyalty. You said you loved both of us, but I can't understand how you could give your all to both. I'm your husband. You promised to forsake all others." He pauses. "Breaking that promise shows me you didn't give me your all. I found out about James by accident. You never told me how you felt. If you had, I would have divorced you, and the pain would have been less. I'm not sure what I did wrong as a husband, but this past year has been agony. You put me on this journey." He looks at her. "I don't trust you anymore. I don't know what other secrets I might uncover. I can't live with the feeling of being the man who wasn't fully loved by his wife. I can't keep living with the lie." Daniel's voice hardens. "I'll file for divorce tomorrow. We'll split everything 50-50ths. I won't hold ill feelings, but I can't stay with you. Divorce or not, I'm mentally and emotionally divorced. Thank you, doctor, for your help, but my therapy is over." He stands, looks at Emily crying but says nothing, and walks out. The fresh air hits his face, and for the first time in ages, he feels relaxed, free. The following week, Emily is served divorce papers. Daniel has already taken his share of the money, leaving only the house to divide. He moves into a new condo near his office. Emily tries contacting him, but he never answers her calls or messages. Their son attempts to intervene, but Daniel asks, "What if, after years of bliss, you woke up in a nightmare? Would you still live in it?" His son stops asking after that. 2 years later, Daniel is finally free of his marriage. Emily tries everything, begging, threatening, crying, but he remains indifferent. At his age, finding a new partner seems unlikely, but he finds comfort in living with his 3 German shepherds. He knows they only love him,